Hey everyone. Today, we're exploring something absolutely wild. It's this incredibly powerful framework that sits right at the intersection of ancient Chinese metaphysics and modern corporate strategy. If you've ever wondered how elite strategists manage to forecast massive structural shifts before they even happen, well, you are in exactly the right place.
Think about this for a second. How do you predict a massive corporate collapse before the bad news ever hits an earnings report? The art of war, the action side of things, is so commonly used in the corporate world to plan and execute strategies. We hear about it all the time. But what about corporate management forecasting methods? How are the real heavy hitters looking ahead? Are they using Shen prediction, basically the ultimate corporate radar? Let's dive deep into this.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with ancient strategy in the modern boardroom, then map out the corporate radar system before decoding the strategic mechanics. After that, we're predicting corporate collapse, and finally, navigating the macro cycle. Let's get into it. Section 1, Ancient Strategy, Modern Boardroom. So the bedrock of this system, known as Taiyi Shenshu, is built right on top of the foundational 5 elements of Chinese metaphysics. And honestly, historically speaking, this wasn't used for, minor daily predictions. No, this was strictly deployed by high-level imperial strategists. It was revived way back in the Tang Dynasty by Wang Ximing under direct imperial orders. And get this, it was actually used to predict the outcomes of Kublai Khan's invasions. It was literally designed to forecast national destinies, natural disasters, major conflicts, the whole shebang. But today, well, this elite art has shifted directly out of the imperial court and straight into modern boardrooms to predict a company's destiny.
Moving on to Section 2, the corporate radar system.
To really wrap your head around this, it helps to contrast it with something you probably already know. In the modern business landscape, think of Taiji Shenshu as your radar. It's the microdata, macroanalysis, early warning system that maps out all your structural vulnerabilities. And the art of war? Well, that's your weapon. That's the decisive action plan you use for execution after the radar shows you exactly where and when to strike. And this brilliantly illustrates how these two systems integrate seamlessly. Taiyi Shenshu operates as your threat diagnosis, right? It calculates the precise timing and figures out whether a threat is coming from the inside or the outside. It literally shows you the invisible structural walls you're about to run into. Then you deploy the art of war to actually execute, using speed, asymmetric leverage, and deception to exploit those exact windows of opportunity the radar just revealed. It's basically a completely unified blueprint for modern leaders. All right, Section 3. Decoding the strategic mechanics. First up, we have to look at leadership. While Sun Tzu looked at fluid market environments through sort of abstract concepts like heaven and earth, Taiyi Shenshu actually maps this out mathematically. The fate of the entire entity rests entirely on the capabilities of what's called the Dajiang, or the commanding star. In your business, this translates directly to the CEO, the founder, or the principal officer. The actual mechanics here are genuinely fascinating. Forecasters map out these cosmic alignments, specifically the trinity of heaven, earth, and man, against exact temporal cycles. We're talking year, month, day, and hour. But here's the crucial part for business. They map the relationship between the host, which is the targeted company, and the guest, which is an attacking rival. Calculating this dynamic determines if a corporate threat is actually coming from an insider or if it's an external attacking force. So, practitioners use this highly precise 3-step diagnostic methodology. Step 1, they analyze the subject count to uncover any internal rot. Think poor planning, lack of innovation, or just weak leadership. Step 2, they weigh the guest versus the host to measure external pressures, things like super aggressive competition or sudden regulatory shifts. And finally, Step 3, they check the mathematical gates and grids to spot structural vulnerabilities. It's a highly systematic early warning system designed to catch weaknesses way before a crisis ever peaks. Section 4. Predicting corporate collapse. Okay, let's play this out like a high-tension corporate thriller. Imagine a legacy tech corporation. They have incredibly valuable intellectual property, but they're suffering from really sluggish growth. They are the host. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a cash-rich, highly aggressive competitor steps out of the shadows, looking to force a buyout and absorb all those juicy assets. They are the guest. Now, before just reacting blindly, the host's executive board runs a macrostructural analysis using that Taiyi radar we talked about, and the diagnostic yields this. The guest count shows a long or fast count, whereas the subject count is short. What does that actually mean?
Well, it mathematically diagnoses that the external competitor currently possesses way superior market momentum and asymmetric aggression compared to the legacy target company. Basically, the momentum is heavily and dangerously stocked against the host.
Then the radar starts flashing these specific scenario evaluation red flags. You start seeing indicators for a cover or hidden threat, right alongside an assault and a compelled confrontation. In the language of corporate strategy, this tells the board with pinpoint accuracy that the rival is secretly preparing an aggressive public tender offer. That's the assault, fueled by hidden accumulations of shares through proxy entities. That's the cover. The attack is already happening, right there in the shadows.
But here is the real kicker, where the radar flashes bright red. The system displays an oppressed or trapped grid. If the CEO, remember, the Dodge Young, is mapped directly into this gate, they are completely paralyzed. They're entirely gridlocked by poor planning, frozen capital, and just terrible cash flow management. The company is fundamentally vulnerable to this external strike simply because its own leadership is trapped.
To ground this in reality, let's look at recent history. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Nokia commanded over 40% of the global mobile market. Huge, right? Then, shortly after the iPhone launched in 2007, they basically collapsed and got sold off. Now, traditional analysts love to blame internal bureaucracy or a clunky OS, but looking at it through the lens of Taya Shinshu, it was a textbook case of an entity totally misjudging this exact host versus guest dynamic. They ignored the structural elements and completely missed the cosmic timing of a massive shifting market cycle.
This brings us to Section 5, Navigating the Macro Cycle.
So, let's say the radar shows your company heading straight for one of those oppressed grids. All is not lost. But the CEO must act. They have to aggressively deploy Sun Tzu's maneuvers to pivot operations into supportive structural gates, specifically the Shen, meaning growth, or Kai, meaning open, gates. And they absolutely must execute this pivot before the predicted collapse state on the hexagram actually arrives. Which leads us to this incredibly powerful executive takeaway. You cannot fight the macro cycle. You can only position yourself to ride it. I love that. This whole system challenges modern leaders to look far, far beyond the next quarterly earnings report. It forces them to anticipate the macro weather patterns of the economy, to keep an eye out for sudden stars, which are basically those unpredictable black swan market events, and ensure their company is actually in harmony with the current epoch. So, I'll leave you with this. In your own strategic planning, whether for your company or even your career, are you blindly fighting the macro cycle? Or are you utilizing a macroscopic radar to ride it? It's a huge paradigm shift from just focusing on execution to engaging in true predictive forecasting. Take a hard look at how you map the structural vulnerabilities in your own environment. It might just be a real game changer.